What's so fascinating about phase synchrony training is, for those of you in the field, a lot of the protocols you use are asynchrony training. You're used to putting sensors on the head, on a special spot on the head, let's say doing C4 SMR, and you're doing asynchrony training at that spot. Asynchrony training helps the brain to make an object of experience. If you want to separate and know as a separateness something, you want asynchrony. If you want to merge and become one with, you want synchrony. So we use synchrony training along with asynchrony training so that the brain can learn to separate and name and not separate, or break down the separation and merge and not necessarily have to know. So synchrony is the act of objectification, and synchrony is the act of merger and becoming one with. The brain wants to do both, and the healthy brain can do both. So the way we use the equipment is we have people do, either independently or as a pair, produce lots of synchrony, and then we ask them, not so much when they're a couple, but when they're individuals, to also produce asynchrony. After they've gotten good at producing synchronous activity, then we ask them to produce asynchronous, just so the brain maintains flexibility. Most of the clients that you will see come in because they have some rigid brainwave patterns, that they're over-reliant on certain frequencies, on certain places on the head. We want to break that over-reliance or break that rigidity. So, and that's what any of us in neurofeedback are doing. You do that no matter what you do in neurofeedback. You're coming in and giving the brain other ways to operate. So what's wonderful about phase synchrony training, if it is in fact, since it is the case that in synchrony you're breaking down that subject-object split, or ceasing to make an object of something, and on the other hand merging with another person or with your own experience, you can see how that's really great for pain management. And we do in our work do a lot of pain management, having us become one with the pain. When you feel and experience your pain and at the same time are producing whole head phase synchrony, you're relating to your pain no longer in an objective way, which keeps it in place and makes it stronger, because you're producing all this adrenaline and cortisol and muscle tension and all the stuff that comes with objectification. But you're starting to open up and merge, and the pain begins to dissipate. So that's how we use the pain technique. And a lot of you watching this will also know how we do it, and we pair it with open focus training. And as you know, open focus training is an attention training technique. It operates on the premise that how you pay attention, not to what you pay attention, but how you pay attention is what orchestrates brainwave activity. So learning to pay attention in ways that are more inclusive and immersed actually changes the neurology to more whole head phase synchrony, which runs all the peripheral systems, the vascular and muscular system and the endocrine system, very differently. So we do this with open focus, and we do it with whole head phase synchrony. Not to say that we don't sometimes use the single site asynchrony training that you may all have in your offices, for ADD for instance, but we don't do that until we've exhausted the use of synchrony training all over the head. And then if need be, and if we want to tune up some particular area of the brain, we'll go to single site asynchrony training. I've been illustrating this at 10 hertz. We find that in the 10 hertz band, it's right in the middle of alpha, there's a lot of palliative effects. But with some practice, you're going to be wanting to change the center frequency. At a workshop we did recently, we had pairs of people, students who never met each other before, who were working in pairs and having some real fun experiences of closeness. Some of them, and they had to negotiate what frequencies they wanted to run at. And they found that sometimes they did better at higher frequencies or a little lower. when Les and I do it, Les likes a little higher frequency, I like a little lower, so we meet somewhere in the middle. Other people have found when working alone that they love a particular frequency. I remember several members of the group found that 12.5 was perfect for them. Now, I don't know what's special about that, but a number of people found that. So you can do synchrony training at any frequency. Years ago, Les had somebody who flew in from Europe just to run at 40 hertz synchronous activity. Felt that he got clear and precise and flowed, and that worked for him. I like to do on myself theta frequency. I'm very anxiety oriented, so running at theta is really nice for me. And we have, the one thing that we have overcome is how to do synchrony training as you're seeing demonstrated here with ADD kids who couldn't tolerate the boredom of just a light and a sound. And for that purpose, both the NS-500, which is the main unit, and, well, no, it's just the NS-500 that acts also as a converter. So you can use the NS-500 as a plug-in to whatever equipment you have, which allows you to use your existing equipment as you always have, but when the games play better, they play because they're phase synchronous activity. For instance, when I work with a kid on a neurocybernetics instrument, I take the NS-500, plug it into the preamp of the neurocybernetics, and then just run the games as you normally would, knowing that every time the games play better, the Pac-Man plays better, it's because phase synchronous activity is being produced. So it's much better for the kids who can still play the games. But I will say what's unique about this equipment, unlike anything else in the field, when used alone and not as a plug-in or a converter for other equipment, is you have an analog system. And an analog system is much more in real time. It doesn't have to be digitized. It doesn't have to go through a computer process which gives it a little delayed feedback. So when you're working on an analog system, you're getting in real time, as close to accurate real-time feedback as is possible to get. So we prefer, when possible, and certainly with adults, to only use the analog systems and not plug into the computers.
This is a demonstration of the NS-500.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'll be demonstrating the NS-500, which is a multi-channel phase synchrony trainer. We're encouraging and teaching the production of whole head phase synchronous activity. In this case, we are doing it in the alpha range, but you have the option of doing it in any range. And at a later point, I will go over the instrument, showing all the knobs and what all the settings mean and how to connect the instrumentation. But first, I would like to just show you how easy it is to set one person up on the equipment and then add a second person so that we can train two people in tandem. This is a demonstration of how to place the sensors on the head using the NS-500. And we use saline sensors kept in place by Velcro bands around the head. And you'll see that this band has Velcro pieces scattered all over it on one side, and it's plain on the other. I'm going to take this band so that the Velcro pieces are on the outside and place it around Dorothy's head, making sure that there are two Velcro strips above each ear so that I'll have a way to attach the crossband that's going to go across the head. And I am making the band tight enough to stay in place, but not so tight that it will be uncomfortable when I place the sensors there. I'm using saline sensors that you can see are very cushy, and they've been sitting in salt water. We use a teaspoon of salt in a cup of water, and we just keep them there all the time. And I'm placing the batch behind the chair and placing one sensor at a time around the scalp. You'll see that they have a cushion material and then rubber around the rest. It's this cushioned material that is going to lay against the scalp. Because the first placement is going to be at FPZ, where I don't have to separate the hair, and to avoid any dripping of the saline solution in the eyes, I'm just going to squeeze it a little so the excess water gets out, and then I place it right at FPZ, and then I take another sensor, and I'm not worried so much about the water, and I'm placing it right at OZ and just separating the hair so it slips nicely in. And then taking another sensor, and here you can use your judgment about how much water is in there, and I'm placing it right above the ear at T3 on this side. And then again at T4, and using the crosshatch, see the Velcro here, I can place this across the head and put the final sensor right at CZ. I'm just separating it to get a good piece of scalp. And then I'm placing the ear clips on both ears, and I'm placing the reference on the right. And because Dorothy has she has some earrings on that are a little hard to take off right now, I'm avoiding the earring, but normally you would have a person take the earrings off. Okay, and that's the setup. We include an extra band because sometimes you would like to do a little bit different settings, maybe do more P3, P4, F3, F4, but this is the standard setting that we do, so it gets the whole brain in synchrony. Okay, and then I'm going to turn on the equipment. This is the on-off button, and it also serves as a threshold that will determine how difficult I'm going to make it. And Dorothy's going to close her eyes and feel the light on her face and hear the sound. And I am adjusting the threshold by turning it clockwise. The more I turn it clockwise, the higher the threshold I'm creating. And the threshold, as you know, is the higher the threshold, the larger amplitude brainwaves I'm requiring before I give her feedback. And I set the threshold just by ear so that the light and the sound are on about 2/3 of the time, give or take a little. And that sounds good to me. And Dorothy knows that when she produces light and sound in tandem, it means she's producing more the brainwaves that I want. In this case, because I've set the center frequency at 10 Hertz, she's getting feedback for 10 Hertz synchronous activity. And she knows she's doing that when the light and sound come on together. And because she's getting a little better, I'm going to just raise the threshold a bit. And that's as simple as that. So we have now Roger, I'm going to place the same sensor montage on Roger, remembering to put the Velcro above each ear, and taking the sensors out of the salt water. And I forgot to show this with Dorothy, but there's a little clip that we've attached to the sensors that I can attach to his shirt just to make sure they stay in place. And I'm once again doing FPZ and OZ. T3 and T4, and enjoying the fact that these are saline sensors and I don't have to deal with electrode paste. It's such an easy hookup and no cleanup. And CZ. And the reference on the right ear and the ground on the left. And so you'll notice with the two-person hookup that I use the original NX-500 and a second, what we call a converter, that's attached by a single cable. And that's basically the hookup. Let me just make it a little harder for you guys so the light isn't always on. Okay. Okay. As you'll notice now, Dorothy and Roger are both hooked up together. When the light and the sound come on together, it means they are producing whole head synchronous 10 Hertz activity in tandem. They both have to be producing the same brain waves in order to get feedback. And they've been doing it a few minutes, so you can see from the light flashing that and the sound beeping that they're getting a lot of feedback. This is the NX-500, and I'm going to go over all the knobs and the jacks and the switches so that you understand what the purpose of each of them. The one on the left is the threshold. It says power/threshold, and it's an on and off switch, and it also performs the function of deciding how high of an amplitude you will allow through before you give a reward. So the threshold, as you turn it clockwise, will require increasingly higher amplitudes before a reward is given or before feedback is given. The jack in the center is called the input, and that's where you're going to attach the sensors, the 5-roll electrodes and 2 ear clips that will form the basis of the head montage. And on the right, it says phase, the knob it says phase-10 Hertz. It's the phase delay, and basically what phase delay is it allows the equipment to wait a little bit before a person is given feedback, so that the feedback isn't given at the moment that the brain is trying to relax, but is given as the brain starts its ascent in amplitude. So it allows for the feedback to hit the brain at just the right time when it wants to be aroused. And you will find over time that if you manipulate that knob on the right, you'll be able to find just the right place where a person feels that making feedback is easy and effortless. But in the beginning, since you won't feel familiar, place that knob somewhere between 180 and 270. Right in the middle is a good place to start. That's where most people are. Now, as we go to the top of the equipment, we have at the very top, we have a jack for strobe, and we have an external strobe that I will show you later on that will plug right in there. And right below that, there's a knob on the left with the red knob that says volume, and that volume knob manipulates the sound system, the sound that's going to act as feedback. And conversely, the knob on the extreme right, the red knob on the extreme right, which says intensity, manipulates how intense the flash of the strobe is. In the center, you see a frequency knob that will dictate, if you set it where it's set right now at 10 Hertz, it is saying that I'm placing my center frequency at 10 hertz. And you, of course, can manipulate that to be at any frequency. But we start people out usually at 10 hertz, and that's where I put it. Underneath that row, you'll see all the way on the left a switch that says mode. It's a mode switch, and you have two options, the one that says norm and one that says dual. You want it set at norm or normal when you're running one person alone on this NX-500, and you'll switch it to dual when you have this unit connected to another unit and you're running two or more people. All the way on the right, there's another switch. It's called the Q switch, and you'll see that there are Q settings of 20, 5, and 10. Basically, the Q is determining how narrow a bandpass you are requiring. When a person is starting out, if you pick the lowest number, which is 5, it allows for the largest bandpass, and it's a little bit easier to work at a lower Q number. As people get better and better, you can raise that bandpass to higher numbers, to a 10 or a 20, with 20 being the highest. Right below that center frequency knob at the center, you'll see two lights. You may not be able to see the lights, but you'll see something that says battery, BAT, and on the right, EL for electrode. The battery light will go on if your battery needs changing. If that light is not on, it means everything is fine. And the electrode light, the EL, will go on if one of the electrodes isn't making good contact, and I'll show you what to do if that happens. Below that, you'll see a row of 5 switches, multicolored switches. Those switches, there's one switch for each of these sensors that's going to be placed on the scalp, and they're color-coded because you might want to develop your own color coding system. For instance, you may want to put the green one, which corresponds to the green that's placed on the sensor that you're going to place on the head, is green, and then there's a yellow one and a blue one, etc. You may want to use your own system, so you always know that green is always at FPZ and yellow is always at CZ, or whatever you choose to do. That is so if you have an electrode problem, isn't making contact, and the electrode light tells you that it's the blue one that's out. You always know where your blue is. Frankly, I never do it that way because I rarely have electrode problems, and if I do, I can always trace it back because it's color-coded on the head. This is the back of the unit. At the top row, there's a row of 4 jacks. The one all the way on the left is called aux in, and it's that jack that will connect with a cable to a second neurofeedback device, which we call a converter, that will allow you to train 2 or more people. And you will plug it into the converter through the aux in. The unity jack is what you will use to plug in a cable to an external neurofeedback device, another neurofeedback device. If you want to use this unit to drive another piece of equipment like a BrainMaster or a neurocybernetics, you will do it with a cable through the unity jack. The filter will allow a cable to another light source. Remember, you have a light source right on top, and I'll show you how to put that in. But you have another one if you choose to have another light source that you want to place somewhere further away. You can do it through that jack. And all the way on the right is the sound, and that's for external speakers that will be able to give you the sound. Beneath that row, you see some knobs. The one on the left, underneath it says tone. That allows you to increase the pitch of the sound that you'll be getting as feedback, to make it higher pitched or lower pitched. Below that, it says number of inputs. It is now set at 1. When you are running one person on the NX-500 or 2 people doing synchrony training between people, you keep it at 1. If you begin to add 3 or more people, then you move that knob to the appropriate setting, so that if it's 3 people, you'll put it on 2. If it's 4 people, you'll put it on 3. Number 1 is for 1 person training and 2 persons training. There's another jack to the right of that knob, and it says CLK, or clock, and that allows you to plug in external magnification of the central frequency that's digitized. So if you have it set at 10 hertz on the knob at the top, by plugging an external meter there, you'll be able to fine tune it so it might be 9.98. You can be very, very precise. If you want to run somebody at 12.2, you can do that too through that clock. And the knob to the right is called delay. It's another phase delay. If you remember, we had a phase delay on the front for the feedback. This is phase delay for the light. And once again, you can play around with that so it all comes as the person practices and it feels easy and right. Or to start out, set it at 75 milliseconds. Set it right in the middle. That's very good. And of course, all the way to the right, you have a 9-volt battery, which runs the whole equipment. That's all you need. And it lasts for hundreds of hours. We rarely change that. We try to be good and turn off the whole unit when we're finished for the day, but often we don't. So it's very long lasting. I've already showed you how to hook up one or two people to the equipment. I now want to go over the hookup very precisely. These are the sensors that have one cable uniting all of the sensors, and I'm going to be placing these sensors on the head. But the first thing I need to do is to take off a cap that's called a depolarizer, which allows when you're not using it at night, if you pull this out and put on the depolarizers, it keeps the sensors in good working order. I get confused about the electronics of it, but apparently it diffuses the electrons, whatever that means. So every night I take it out and I just put on this depolarizer, and it does the work, or every few days. I'm going to plug this into the input right at the center. You will have a jack that has a red dot on the top, and that tells you that you place it in with the red dot on top. Some of you won't have that. But what you do is you place this in the center and you feel around to where it wants to slip in naturally, and then you just press it in all the way. It's fairly obvious. Some of you won't have a red dot, some of you will have a flat surface, but you'll get used to doing that quite easily. So the sensors are hooked into the NX-500, and now I'm turning the instrument on, and I presumably have a person connected to it, and it will allow me to set the threshold. If they're having a hard time, I'll set it easier. If they're having if they're having an easier time, I may make the threshold higher by turning it clockwise. So presumably they're on the equipment. This is plugged in, my threshold is on, my on-off switch is on, it's at the right threshold. And I have the phase delay since it's a new person, and I don't want to fool around with finding the exact right spot. I'm going to place it somewhere between 180 and 270. It's going to delay the phase. It's a phase delay, and I put it right in the middle. Now, if the equipment if everything is on, the battery light should not go on. My battery should be good. If it does go on, obviously I change the battery. But if I notice, and let me just show you this, if I take one of the sensors, I'm just taking it out of the cup rather than on the head, but you see how that electrode light goes on? I took one of the sensors out. So I look at that and I say that blue light is on. It means that one of the sensors is not making contact, but I don't know which one it is. So I turn all of these switches into the off position, and then one by one I will turn them on. If the sensor is making good contact, when I turn that individual switch on, the electrolyte will either flash on briefly and then go off, or not come on at all. The sensor that's the culprit will be the one that forces the electrolyte to stay on, and I'll show you that. I know that I took the green light off, the green sensor off, but I'm first going to turn this on. You notice the light goes off. Turn this one, the light doesn't come on. Turn this one, the light comes on and goes off instantly. Same thing with the yellow, but watch what happens when the green is on. the sensor light stays on. That tells me I haven't made good contact with the green sensor. So what I will do is wiggle it around, maybe squeeze some more of the salt water, or discover I haven't separated the hair well enough. Okay, so the equipment is on. I just turned it off now so we don't hear the sound. I have all the sensors in the on position. I have it set at norm for one person. I'm only doing one person now, not at dual. It's a beginner, so I have the Q at 5. I want to make it fairly easy and have a wide band pass. Presumably, I'm going to run this person at 10 hertz, so I have it set at 10. And the next thing I'm going to put on is the strobe. Now I'm attaching the strobe right into this center piece here. And that strobe will be going off when the feedback occurs, and I have, if you remember, there's an intensity knob in the upper right here. I can make the sound intensity, the strobe light less intense or more intense, as I can also change the volume. And as with all the plugins, you just want to make sure everything is well seated. You want this plug here to be well seated, and you want this one so that it's not sticking up at all. Okay, now I am going to take the sound unit, the external sound unit, and if you remember, we have a knob, we have a plug at the back that says sound, and I'm inserting it in that way. I'm not a lefty, so it's a little harder with my left hand. Now I'm going to plug in the external digital display that displays the center frequency down to 1/100th of a cycle. So if I want it set at 10.50, I will be able to do that, or 9.95, I will be able to do that. And I do that by plugging it into the clock, or the CLK. And now there will be times when I would like the light, instead of being on the top of the unit, to be at a distance further away for whatever reason. I have the option of doing that by taking the strobe off the top of here and placing it into this external unit and plugging it right into the filter jack at the back. So that allows me to have two options about where I place the light. And if you remember, on the back, there's a number of inputs. I'm only running one person, so I keep it set at 1. And the auxiliary in, I'm not using that jack because I'm only using one person here. And I'm not using the unity jack because I'm not using an external neurofeedback device. And the intensity of the tone, once the sound is on, I can manipulate that knob. And that's the simple hookup. And that tone knob all the way at the end will manipulate the pitch of the sound. Some pitches are preferred over others for individual people. And that's the simple hookup. So you then have the person running as you saw earlier in the demo and they're sitting here enjoying the feedback. Now we have a second unit we call a converter, which is going to allow us to hook a second person up. And there's a simple cable that I plug into this, which is called the output. Here again, a 9-volt battery is going to run that unit. And the other end of the cable goes into aux in. And there you have the two connected. Let me just show you this unit a little bit. This is very similar to the NX-500, only it has less controls because the NX-500 is going to be doing most of the controlling. But once again, you see you have a battery tester. The light will go on if the battery isn't working. You have a reference tester. Remember, if the sensors weren't making good contact, you could find out why, because the electrode light would go on. And then you have all the 5 sensors, so I can test which one is not making good contact. And because I'm running a second person, I will be connecting another set of electrodes, and I will have taken off the depolarizer, and I will find where it belongs and plug it in right there. And now everything is connected. If you remember when you were looking at two people in training, they were each had a set of bands around their head with the sensors in, and they were each looking at the light. Now, one of the things that is going to come up, and they were both looking at the light and hearing the sound, and when they were producing synchronous activity at whatever frequency we had in tandem, they would get more light and sound. But one of the things that you're going to run into is when you're setting somebody up, the most likely situation is that one person has more of that natural frequency than the other, and you do not want that person, you don't want the person with more of that phase synchronous activity to flood the one who has less. So you have a gain knob that's going to allow you to adjust for that. And I'm just going to turn this around and show you what we do. So in setting up two people, if you remember, the first person I hooked up was on the NX-500, and if you remember, I hooked Dorothy up and she was running really well, and then I turned off the unit while I hooked Roger up from this unit. So if I discover that Roger has the natural ability to produce twice as much of the frequency I want in synchrony, what I'm going to do is place Roger's sensors in Dorothy's machine and take Dorothy's sensors and put it in the converter, and then adjust this gain to number 2, saying that it ups her output by 2, so it equals his. So it just allows her to get, it's like, I guess, what you would call handicap in golf. It allows her to make a more equal contribution. And that essentially is it. If you have any questions, please call us at the clinic, at the center. We're 609-924-0785. Or log on to our website, OpenFocus, one word, openfocus.com, and send us an email. We're very good at responding. I came to this with no electronic background. I'm a traditional talk therapist, and it seemed a little overwhelming, but really it's quite easy, and I can help you, or Les can help you quite easily.